Welcome back to another episode of Mindful Endeavors. I am your host, the New Age Alchemist, and joining us today is Robert Smith, also known as the Marina Marine. Uh, before we go ahead and continue, we just want to make the disclaimer that we are not mental health professionals, and we're just kind of speaking on the topic from our experience, what we see out in the world, what we've experienced, what we've interacted with other people dealing with other situations. And we always encourage people that if they need help to go ahead and seek it. And most importantly, encourage the conversations to keep that going, make sure that the topic doesn't get lost in, and we keep talking about it in a nuanced discussion. All right.
Definitely.
So Robert, you reached out to me on Instagram, the Marina Marine. Thank you for reaching out to me. I'm happy to help you. Quickly introduce yourself to the listeners.
Hello everybody. My name is Robert Smith, aka the Marine. Was born and raised in Northern California. Joined the Marine Corps when I was 17. Spent 6 years stationed in North Carolina, so I kind of got a little feel for what it was like living in the South out there, and I loved it. So I've kind of been on that outside outdoors mode since then, and I went back and got out of the Marine Corps afterwards. I've been deployed. Um, in combat situations and have had plenty of issues regarding mental health, physical ailments, and things like that from my service. Um, got out of the Marine Corps, used the GI Bill, went ahead and, started going to culinary school. Always loved cooking. Ever since I was a child, I watched my mom, helped my mom, kind of, followed in those steps. That was something I loved doing. I even cooked in the Marine Corps. I used to do barrack cookouts and would cook for people in the barracks and do things like that. And everybody loved my food, thought I had the talent to do it. So I figured, hey, why not do something I love doing? Help. And also, I felt like food is an avenue to help other people overcome things as well. So it was kind of like for my mental health, it helped me feel better about doing things for other people. And I felt like cooking and sharing my food with other people was that avenue, sort of, you can say.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I, went to culinary school, got my culinary degrees, started going to school for business management, small business management. Still in process of doing that right now. Got a few more classes actually I need to get taken care of to get that associates for that. But eventually I want to open my own small business, my own like food truck or some sort of thing like that to where I can travel and not be stationary in one place and have something small where I can have my own ideas and not be working for like a huge conglomerate, like a, restaurant, mainstream restaurant or anything like that. I can put my own ideas into the menu, recipes, stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
but then I started working in the kitchen field. I started working for restaurants, and I realized immediately that it was not a good idea for me to be in those environments with, stress and like basically, being told the things that I learned in culinary school were incorrect and things like that. So I kind of got into it with a lot of my managers because I was cooking things the way I thought they were supposed to be cooked from what I was taught. And they were like, no, we just need it out now, out. And so I realized, working in that type of environment, not being able to put out what I wanted to put out, basically doing what, somebody else's, basically making a name for somebody else pretty much when I should be investing in my own opportunities for myself. So I, decided, what, I'm just gonna go into clerical work and figure that stuff out as I go. So I went into clerical work. I was actually working for the state of California for the Department of Developmental Services, and had been working there for a few years, and was going to culinary school at the same time as that, and working outside, working at restaurants as well. And I just, I started thinking to myself, I'm not happy. I was always stressed. I'd always be worried about what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. Like I was confused. I wasn't sure where I was at. I was almost 30 years old and didn't really know exactly if I was going to do anything in regards to the schooling that I went to. I felt like I kind of wasted my time going to culinary school and trying to do all those things. But
Mm-hmm.
once I started working the clerical work, I kind of realized that all workplaces are kind of like that. They all have like their things. And being a service connected disabled veteran, it was harder for me because I had, appointments, I had knee surgery, and and it was hard because when you're working in an environment, they're not really worried about what you got going on. They're more worried about the work and the production needing to be done. So I had issues with that. That caused me more stress, aggravated my PTSD. And then
Mm-hmm.
I started going to a group and doing all that stuff. And I felt like that helped me. And I moved out of California, moved up to Washington State in February 2020, and ever since then I've had a whole new outlook. I'm out in nature every day. I fish every day. I cook outside. I do catch and cooks. I do all kinds of things that I weren't, well, at least I felt like I wasn't able to do where I was in California because of the location.
Yeah.
It's like here I can drive 2 minutes to a lake and then literally walk to the ocean where I live. And there it's like you had to drive 2.5 hours to get to the bay, or drive another 2.5 hours the opposite direction to get to the snow. So it was like kind of like I was in the middle of the valley, and like the smog and all that stuff. It was just like an environment that wasn't really like clean, like. So I
Yeah.
just felt like moving on, it was better for me. And I felt like since I've come here, it's helped me immensely in regards to just appreciating nature itself. And just being out in nature kind of makes you realize how small you are. You know what I mean? You realize like you're not this huge thing that you think you are. You're kind of just a piece of the puzzle, basically, So I felt like it's kind of aligned me and set me straight. And I'm just, that's where I'm at right now. And I'm trying to spread the good word about being outdoors and how it's helped me in my situation.
I mean, thank you for, I mean, you touched on all three topics that we're going to go over in this
Mm-hmm.
episode. And that's, it's a very good intro that you put out. Yeah, because I mean, I agree with all three things that you said. Well, actually, the second two things, and then the first thing, which is, your experience in the Marines and, being in the armed forces, that is something that I'm not familiar with because, I mean, I never really joined any military branch or anything like that. But
Definitely.
I mean, I have friends that have done that, have done tours in Iraq, and they come back and we're playing soccer, and I'm like, how was it like that? And I can tell that something in them has changed. Like they definitely don't come back the same person.
Definitely.
Whether that's good or bad, it depends on situation for a situation. I mean, I've seen some people that need the discipline and they go to either the Army or the Marines, and they come back like a more respectful person. They
Definitely.
basically have gone humbled, and I've seen the opposite side where it's like I've seen somebody that's been in combat, and like when they hear a loud noise, they immediately like instinctively go to reach for their rifle.
Yeah, definitely.
Just because, yeah. So I mean, that still for me doesn't qualify me as an expert in this situation. And so that's why I'm very happy that you came on and give us a little bit more of a perspective especially for those that never really been in combat or even been around, people that are veterans. So
Definitely.
I mean, first and foremost, my question is like what's it like to be in a combat situation? Like, I know because we talk about like in a normal situation, like getting the appropriate amount of sleep and don't try not to stress out over things, but I would imagine that's very difficult to do when you're like in a combat area.
Oh yeah. So like, how can I put this into perspective that most people would probably understand? It's almost as if you just lock everything out. You just block it all. You try to ignore what's going on with your family at home, any drama you got going on with like your wives or your significant other, I should say. And you just got to kind of lock that kind of stuff out, because once you start investing into the emotions of everything, you kind of allow yourself to get caught up in it. And I feel like the problem with vets is they're afraid to speak their mind about what they've experienced because they feel like it's a stigma. And I'm going to admit that I've always felt that. I mean, even talking to you right now, I feel it's awkward, but I feel like people, as veterans that, have these things going on with us, whether they're mental or, physical or anything like that, we need to start expressing ourselves, because I feel like not a lot of veterans have a voice right now. And I feel like the more veterans open their mouths up and talk to each other, because I think so when I was going to counseling, I was going to one-on-one counseling with one counselor, and that was fine. But I felt like there was something there that was missing. And with the VA, it was really hard. It was like, oh, you want to just take pills? Here, we'll give you pills. It's like, that's all it was. It wasn't like, I mean, they were even telling me like, oh, you seem like you're okay. Like, why are you even here? like, like basically kind of like questioning, like, you know, whether I should be there because I'm actually not being forced. It was weird. Like if you're forced to, they'll like lock you down. Like if you have somebody call on you or something, they'll put you on lockdown. But when you
Mm-hmm.
actually try to go get help for yourself, they're like, well, if you're getting help for yourself, you must not need help, which is, I think, kind of backwards. And when I went to the outreach veteran center, which is like not a branch of the VA. They're paid for by the VA, but they're separate, like a separate entity. And when I started going to them, I noticed like even the one-on-one counseling, he seemed like he was genuinely interested in what was going on, trying to help me and work with me. And he suggested like to start going. They actually have like a process. Like first you do one-on-ones, then you start going to like group meetings and stuff. And when I started going to group meetings, I was going to group meetings with Vietnam War vets. I was like the only one in there that was not a Vietnam War vet. Everybody in there were all in their 60s and 70s. They were all old men. I was like one of the youngest guys in there, the youngest guy in there. And I learned immediately, like they all had regrets about not going and getting help. Like they've lost their livelihoods, their families, their friends, and that woke me up immediately. I was like, I knew I needed help, and my wife, well, she was my girlfriend at the time. She helped me a lot because I didn't even realize how bad I was until I
Mm-hmm.
had somebody else in my life to, because all my friends, they knew, but they won't say anything to you. They kind of brush it off, or they're uncomfortable about talking to you about it because they don't know what you experience and things like that. But my wife, she was on me. She was like, you got issues, you have anger problems, you need to figure this stuff out. And that's why I started getting into it. I mean, I always knew I needed something, I just didn't realize how bad it was until I
Yeah.
met her. And so, when I started going to the group and talking to all these guys, they were all telling me like, "Hey, man, you good on you to be on here." I wish when I was in my 30s that I went and got help because my entire life could be different now. And that opened my eyes. So since then, and that was back in California, so I stopped going to that when I moved up here. Ever since then,
Mm-hmm.
that seeing the perspective of other vets made me realize like there's a problem in the vet community about speaking out about these things. And I get it because I've had it where people are like, "Oh, have you killed anybody?" That's like the first thing they ask you. "Oh, you shot anybody, or you killed anybody? You seen anybody dead?" Or it's never like, "Oh, what did you do for your job?" Or it was always like some violent kind of thing. And I think
Yeah.
vets, it triggers your PTSD because you get put into like an awkward position that you feel like you're cornered. You feel like you're like, I don't want to explain this because I don't want to talk about it anyway. And now you just get put in this awkward position. Like you gotta figure out how should I answer this question without making that person be terrified or think something, of me because of that stigma. You know what I mean? But
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you that I mean, just mental health in general is just a huge stigma, especially amongst men to be able to reach out and
mm-hmm,
talk about it. Especially like I've talked about it with my first guest that I've ever had on the podcast, where we feel like sometimes we're thinking, oh well, they went out, they fought for our country, they're tough, so they can deal with it. But it's
yeah,
in reality, it's like that's a bad attitude to really take because, like you said, when you went to the VA, when they basically looked at you like, oh well, you came in perfectly fine, so we think nothing's wrong with you, and that's the
yeah,
problem because a lot of the mental health issues sometimes don't come up until you get a trigger or some kind of something that from your environment that triggers that PTSD
exactly,
or whatever. You don't see it until it happens. So it's like to just assume that. I mean, I definitely think it's wrong. That's one of the reasons why I decided to start this podcast and try to talk about any kind of like issue that's really deteriorates mental health. And yeah, so that definitely I would definitely agree that especially like with vets, it's kind of hard for sometimes for them to reach out because you're expected to be, oh well, like like for example, like what you said, like some people they'll ask, oh, have you killed anybody? So they kind of assume that there's like this toughness thing where, all right,
mm-hmm,
well, if you've done that, you're fine. It's like no, like don't
yeah.
assume that, like
Yeah, and it's like
so
and then vets that have been in combat situations that weren't necessarily in combat puts them in awkward situations. It's like it's one of those things where it's like instead of asking them that, like ask them if they're okay. You know what I mean? Like, hey,
Mhm.
are you okay from what you've seen? Like, that's kind of, I feel like there's not enough of the compassionate empathy side of that. It's more so I just want the answer to my question, not, I don't want to know how you feel about anything. I just kind of want to know what you did. You know what I mean? Like, not how you
Yeah.
feel, but what you did. And I think that's a little
Oh,
unfair for a lot of the vets, especially when they don't even like talking about it to their families or anything like that, let alone, being asked. I mean, when I was in school, when I was going to college, I mean, I had kids that were like 18 because I was going to community college, and they were always asking me crap like that. Like, we had groups, there was always like this awkward, when they found out I was in the Marine Corps, especially when they find out you're a Marine, they're like, oh, it's like there's this like almost like this tension, kind of like there's this like invisible tension, like they don't know if you're like crazy or you got PTSD, and everyone's always like, look out, like if you I notice like when people talk about it, it's like you got to watch out for those kind of people, because people that have PTSD, they're not stable, they're not capable of controlling their anger and things like that. And I think that's just exactly the reason why we have so many issues today in society, because instead of solving the problem at the source, we're talking about the problems themselves, and not really getting to the issue. Like, nobody's talking about PTSD in inner cities and things like that. You're kind of like on their own thing about it, and I feel like that's a big issue in America, is PTSD, and the fact that everyone kind of overlooks it. I think I lost you, buddy.
okay. I do apologize for that. My internet cut out for a brief second. So you were talking about like, so the last thing I heard was that you were talking about like that's why you feel like we're having all these issues in society because they're it's being downplayed and we're having like this other
Yeah, it's
kind
like,
of
I mean, like, I grew up in the hood, so like there's crime there. There's, when you're a kid, like I was getting jumped, I was, getting robbed. I had all those things happen to me. So like when you're a child and you're exposed to those things, regardless of how you feel when you're younger, you grow up and you kind of have that grudge. Like, you always remember, hey, this is what happened to me and it was a traumatic experience. And I'm gonna, like, people hold grudges for things like that. And I feel like that's the biggest problem, like with crimes on the inner city. Like, all this stuff is kind of getting swept under the rug, and nobody's really talking about the fact that what happens after these crimes are committed, in regards to the parties involved, like the family members of a lost loved one or anybody like that. Nobody talks about their healing process or how they get over that hump and dealing with the loss. And I feel like that's a big issue.
mm-hmm.
Nobody's appreciating the things that are happening right in front of them until it's too late. And instead of talking about PTSD, everyone's like, oh, no, no, I don't have that. I don't, because everyone's worried about like how they'll look to everyone else, like whether it's employment, your family members thinking. I mean, even with my wife, I have a hard time talking to her about things. I've told her things I would never tell anybody else, but even then, it's hard for me to talk about things, and not feel like she's gonna feel some sort of way, even when she's my wife. So like, when it comes to just everybody else in general, it's hard to trust anyone to talk about these things. Even a therapist, it's hard to talk to them about things. I mean, there's things I've seen I would never tell a therapist, just because I don't like bringing it up. And the
Mm-hmm.
one interesting thing about the group that I really loved, and which I thought was a breakthrough for me anyways, was they had us write a letter about any traumatic experience we have, and basically write that letter to the person. Like, if you was like, let's say somebody you knew was in the military or the Marine Corps, and they passed away while you saw them pass away, you write a letter to that person, like, hey, because there's that guilt, from being like, you feel like, oh, they died, and if I don't do what I'm supposed to do, it's like, a stain on their reputation. Like, you almost think like, why me instead of them? You start getting in that mode, and that's why I think a lot of vets have problems. They're always
Mm-hmm.
constantly, thinking like, why me? look at I'm an alcoholic, I'm struggling, I'm homeless, and I'm alive while, I saw my friend get shot and killed. You know what I mean? And they live with that, and it's like a repeating memory in your head all the time, whether it's you hear that person's name, the date, the smell in the air, like you can smell certain smells that normal people can't smell or even pay attention to. It's like things like that. And I feel like that's a big stigma when it comes to PTSD, is realizing how it affects almost every. I feel like this is just my opinion. I feel like every single person on earth has some degree of PTSD. It's
Right.
either very minor or really, really traumatic, but everybody has some sort of form of PTSD, and it aggravates anxiety, and people start saying, "Oh, it's anxiety. Oh, it's depression. Oh, it's this," but they don't talk about the one main topic up there that kind of has all those things as the symptom for that one main thing. And I think people don't want to be associated with PTSD, but they'll say they are anxious or they're depressed, but they don't want to say they have anger, because PTSD is like that, oh, the anger, and I feel like that's the biggest stigma. But hopefully we can get past
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, I definitely agree with most of that, like with your opinion, because I do think that we often struggle, especially nowadays, because I think our attention span is becoming smaller and smaller. So
Oh yeah.
rather than to actually getting to know a person, it's easier to just slap a label and think, all right, I already know what they would fall under this label. And
Yep.
then we get caught up in identities, like for example, like people think that being depressed is an identity, being anxious is an identity, and it's not. Like, and you're right, like the PTSD is the umbrella that encompasses all those things, but each
Yep.
each each thing individually is like an issue of mental health, and it doesn't have to be somebody's identity. That's the thing. Like, it's like you struggle with anxiety, you struggle with anxiety. You're not an anxious person. You just struggle with it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing when we need to start getting comfortable with talking about and actually starting from that point before we just slap a label really quick on somebody. And that's kind of why we just, I mean, even just having simple discussions, like it's hard because people get all defensive because they people slap labels on each other, or sometimes they slap labels on themselves. The other person sees the label and they're like, oh, I don't want to talk to this person because so and so or whatever, and this and
Yeah.
that. And it's like, this is why like I'm trying to talk about it in a nuanced discussion, because oftentimes even in the mainstream, like when, like for example, when COVID happened and you see all these people being isolated because of lockdowns and stuff like that, like none of the issues associated with mental health were talked about. Like all
Mm-hmm.
these rise in suicide attempts, all these rise in suicides, all this rise in like what is it, domestic
Domestic
violence and things like
crime.
that.
Yep.
Yeah, so it's like we need to encompass all that because it was already bad enough before COVID, and then it just got worse after COVID.
Yep.
I mean, at least that's what I think.
Yeah, I believe the same thing, especially when you have somebody who's in an environment where they're working constantly with other people, and then you just say you got to work from home, and they're isolated, and then they're not used to doing their job, without somebody there, and the whole process. I mean, because my wife has been working from home, so I've seen it from that perspective, and I can see
Mm,
it's harder to communicate, it's harder to get things done in a timely manner. And I feel like that also adds stress, because not only are people isolated, but now they're stressed because their jobs are difficult, a little more difficult, because they have to do more to get their job done. You know what I mean? They have to communicate more, come outside their comfort zones, and kind of work with people more, because you have to communicate better when you're all working from a different area. You know what I mean? And I feel like that's another big issue. And on top of just telling people they got to wear masks. I mean, I have issues when I have my mask on and I'm around a lot of people. I start to like get panicky. I start to feel like I can't
mm,
breathe, and like I gotta go outside. I've had to like literally calm myself down on numerous occasions, because I get like anxiety, like what the hell, like I can't breathe, like I'm not getting enough air, and there's hella people like suffocating around me. So I've had times where I've had to literally be like, you know what, it's fine, everything's gonna work itself out. Eventually, you're gonna walk out the store and you're gonna take this mask off. But it's not everybody can process things that way, and it's taken me a lot. I've read books, I've read PTSD for Dummies, all kinds of different like Buddhist books, my wife got me into Ajahn Brahm, who's like a Buddhist monk who practices meditation and talks about like just like all kinds of different things and kind of gives you perspective on how to think of things differently instead of making it like all these negative things, even like negative things, to just embrace it and just know that it's not going to be a thing that lasts forever, you know? And I feel like that's helped me a lot given all this. Because I mean, if I didn't go to counseling, I didn't go to that group thing. And then, because we bought our house in February 2020. So, like, literally right when COVID was popping off, we are going through that whole, and we were moving from California to Washington. So, like, literally, I took a job up here in January, flew up here, started working, and my wife was back there. I had to drive back down, get a U-Haul, pack all our shit up, and then drive back. So it was like all that stuff was going on with COVID. Like I would have lost my mind. You know what I mean? I would have lost
Yeah.
my mind. So practice makes perfect. It really does. And I'm guilty because recently I've been kind of slacking on, you know, trying to figure out my counseling because I'm not really into the like being on a Zoom call with the therapist. I feel like it's not as like, you know, genuine or like, you know, I don't even know how to say it, but I just feel like it's not genuine. So
Yeah.
I have had to talk to my wife about that because it's not good to think like that and to be like, oh, I'm not going to do it just because it's not the way I want it to be done. And I need to understand, hey, you're going to have to make compromises if you're going to want to help yourself. So I'm learning
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Yeah, because I mean, even a lot. I do think that a lot of it is just the practice of the mindset, right? Like getting the right mindset and being able
Hmm.
to, like before, like just immediately taking one impulse reaction, try to assess the situation, right?
Hmm.
That's that's another thing. I think kind of attributes back to the short attention span that you just see something and you want to get it out quick, bang it out quick, whatever.
Oh yeah.
Like and you kind of when you're running on impulse, sometimes that may work. I don't always view it that way, but yeah. So it's one of those things where you get lost in the shuffle, and then before you know it, you're actually making problems worse. And even like with how our medical field handles what is it, mental health, where they're quick to prescribe something. Like
Yeah.
it's we need. I think personally, in my humble opinion, like we need to kind of just practice with like trying to get the right mindset first, and then that kind of at least will allow us to really tell whether a person is really wired different or if it's just something that they can kind of control on their own, because there is also that factor, right? That people's brains are wired different, so
Hmm.
there's chemical imbalances or chemical reactions that don't occur from brain to brain, per person to person. So
Hmm.
but
Well,
the whole approach of just, oh, we'll give you Prozac or whatever and all this stuff,
yeah.
and then those things now require other drugs so they don't cause you to like have like suicidal thoughts and stuff like that, and the problem just keeps compounding even more and more. And I think meditation, like what you were saying, like the Buddhist books, I think meditation can help a lot. And I mean, I would like to at least use that to kind of transition to our other topic, like cooking, because you talked about like cooking and you're a
Oh yeah.
chef, and I personally love to cook as well. I love to smoke meat, and I think I mean, I know I for sure use it as a way of meditation, just being able to like mess with spices,
Oh yeah.
mess with different
Yep.
ingredients, and you
Experiment.
know,
Yep. And then when
that's,
it
I
comes
mean,
out
you would
good, it's
definitely,
like you just healed yourself.
yeah, because then you get all excited about like, oh my god, this tastes really, really good, and now you want to share it with people, and
Yeah,
you want to
exactly.
interact, and then
And
that
it and
social
it's
interaction comes.
something that you made, you know what I mean? It's not something you just buy. It's like there's more, it's like effort, you know what I mean? I feel like when I'm doing that, I'm like doing something for somebody, you know what I mean? I'm not just, because anybody could just buy somebody dinner or take them to dinner. It's different when you can actually think about what that person likes, what that person likes in regards to taste, different spices, flavors, all that stuff, and to be able to put all that together and make something for somebody. I think that's so underrated. Like, I know there's a
Mhm.
lot of chefs that are like that, and that's why they are successful. But there's a lot of chefs that just are there for the money. They're just pushing meals out. They don't care, they're just, trying to get home or whatever. And I feel like that's the problem that I had when I was working in that
Yeah.
environment, because everybody I worked with, they didn't even give a shit. It was just a job they had. Excuse my language. It was just a job they had, and they didn't care. They just, I don't care if the meal is the way they want it or if it's right. I'm just pushing it out because they want it fast. Like and that's another thing I learned about the attention span stuff is it doesn't matter. They just want the food out, food out, food out, food out, food out. It's not about
Mm-hmm.
quality. It's not about the same thing with like content now. It's like it's not about quality. It's just like what can I see that's cool real fast? You know what I mean? Like it's just like it's instead of thinking about the entire substance. I'm not, and it's like with movies. I'm even guilty of it. I don't even watch movies anymore because I feel like my attention span has shrunk. Like where I've been trying to do that more actually just to kind of practice that. And especially when I've been fishing now, you have to
Yeah.
have patience. You can't rush in to get a backlash out and you can't, there's none of that and that kind of stuff. And the same thing with cooking. You
Yeah.
can't, the same thing with cooking. You're rushing through everything. Like if I cooked dinner for my wife on our anniversary and I just didn't have, like I didn't care, I just rushed through it, it'd come out like crap. She would see that I wasn't invested in that meal for our anniversary. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that's kind of how I feel with like restaurants. People go in there and they're like, oh man, this is horrible. Because it's like the
Mm-hmm.
person that's making that food doesn't care. There's no connection between the person who's eating and the person who's cooking. You know what I mean? And the
Absolutely.
best
Yeah.
chefs in the world are able to do that. They're able to connect with people without even having to see them. That's
Yeah.
like the kind of thing I want to have happen in my life. I want to influence people without having to tell them or like basically I just want people to see what I do and be like, "Oh, you know what? That's some good stuff." And I kind of want to do some stuff like that, And that's kind of why I got into this and started my page and because I started I just started fishing last year and all that. So that's why I started doing that to get, to show people, hey, if you have issues, you can still have a happy life and you can still do whatever you want to do with your life as long as you put in the work and make the effort, you know.
Yeah.
And the same thing with food. Like you got to work, 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 work. The more you practice, the more you cook, the better you're going to be. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's kind of a part of the thinking that went into creating my handle, the New Age Alchemist, because when you look at like for example, like I don't know if you watch anime, but the anime the Full Metal Alchemist,
Oh
they
yeah.
talk about like they talk about what is it, the
Hmm.
law of alchemy, like you gotta put in whatever you take out, right? So
Exactly.
it's
Yep.
cooking falls right into that because you can't make something out of nothing and you got to put in the time for it. You got to put in that effort. Otherwise, it's
Yeah.
not going to come out, the way you want it to, especially when you're trying
Exactly.
something new.
Yeah. Because
So
if you don't know
there are
what you're
no,
doing and you're not invested and you just toss something on that pan, it's not going to come out the way you want it.
yeah, exactly. I mean, if you want just to like for the sake of eating, for the sake of getting calories, for the sake of getting nourishment, yeah, throw a piece of meat on there, put salt, pepper. That's it. Just wait until it's
Yeah.
fully cooked. But like if you
Exactly.
actually want to like be creative and put your heart and soul into, and even like your culture, that's one of the things why I do appreciate cooking a lot too, because you can like really learn about the cultures of different places where the dishes came from. Like my family's from Mexico, and like one of the things that a lot of people don't know is like the tacos al pastor, like that they cook on
Yeah.
a spit. They never knew. A lot of people know that actually came from Lebanese immigrants, and that's how that kind of
Yeah.
became a
Yep.
thing. So
Yeah. It's
it's just
crazy. Yeah. And that's
yeah,
what I
like that
learned
kind of
when I
history
was
of
when I
food.
was in culinary school, and that's what they teach you. They say, hey, you see French cuisine and all these specific cuisines. They're all branches from other cuisines. You know what I mean? Like in India, they got all their spices from like the Spanish people and stuff like that. And there's like it's like everybody kind of put their hands in together and work together to make things. And I think that's what's missing nowadays. I feel like it's kind of like shut, shut, shut. Like there's not really that's the thing what they call the fusion stuff now where they have like
Mm.
Korean street tacos or stuff like that. That's what they call fusion, but it should be like where you kind of like do the same thing, but it's like you're learning from that culture too. You're learning why that spice was used. You're learning why those people had those spices, like whether they were in an environment they could only grow certain things. And that's why all that stuff is interesting to me because it's like not just about the people and what they did to cook, it's their culture and why they cooked the way they did. You know what I mean?
I know exactly what you mean because like a lot of people think that potatoes are Irish there because it's a staple in Ireland, right? But they didn't originally come from there. They came from North and South America. That's where they came
Yeah,
from. Same thing
exactly.
with tomatoes in Italy. Tomatoes were not from Italy natively. Like the very first pizza was basically just bread and cheese. That's what it
Yep,
was. There was
exactly.
no tomato sauce.
Yep.
So it's really fascinating to talk about all those things. And like I think I mean, I purposely stopped using the word fusion, not because it's like or anything like, not for any other particular reason than just the fact that at a certain point everything became fusion, and like
Yeah.
everything's becoming fusion now. Like you look at LA specifically, you just talked about like the Korean
Uh,
tacos and stuff, like the bulgogi truck.
oh
I
yeah.
would just call that an LA staple now. It's just
Yeah.
LA food. Like it's a,
Exactly.
it's a
It's
combination
like
of different
an
cultures,
LA,
different.
it's like LA culture food, you know what I mean? Like it's the culture
Yeah,
of Los Angeles, you know what I mean? Because everybody's like, you know, out there and about and they need that quick go meal and they just grab that taco and get to work or do whatever because everybody's on the go. And that's like why I think that culture started there, especially the food trucks. Like the food trucks out there were booming and doing all that because people were constantly boom, boom, boom on the go, and it was crowded. People didn't want to have to sit down and eat. They wanted to get their food and go, and it allowed them to get their food and like go and interact with each other and not be in a restaurant. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I totally understand that stuff, and I'm all for any kind of like food that does that, where it gets people out of their comfort zone at the same time as
Mhm.
trying to keep them in their comfort zone. So it's like I get it, but I'm old school. I like to figure out the source of every recipe. I like to see why these people use them, and you like it's just like you see their struggle kind of, you see like certain people could, certain, cultures could only grow certain vegetables, and then they
Right.
met with another culture, and then they traded ideas and traded, produce and stuff like that, and it became something entirely different. And I feel like that's kind of missing. People don't appreciate now. There's this cultural appropriation stuff. It's like you should be able to embrace each other's cultures. You should be able to be like, you know what, I love this culture. I don't see what the problem with that is. You know what I mean? But I feel like that's what food is about sharing each other's cultures and expressing your culture and things like that. And I'm guilty because I'm Puerto Rican and I haven't really been like around that side of the family much, but I could have taken
Mm.
upon myself and learned recipes and things like that. And I'm going to start getting into that now that I have some more time. Start reading about my food, in Puerto Rico and the culture and where all that stuff, because I know a lot of the spices come from Africa and things like that, and from India. So I've been trying to get back into that, and I'm going to start doing that too. So that way I could get more in touch with my culture through the food as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's the perfect thing about like, because when we talk about like mental health, part of that is alleviated or it's enhanced by interaction with people, and the easiest way to interact with somebody that doesn't speak your own language is through food. Like, I mean, that's what
Exactly.
I felt like honestly,
Yeah, you don't
like you
even
don't
have to
have to
speak the
necessarily.
same language. If that person you don't even know what they're saying. They put that food in front of you, and you taste it, and it's bomb, and you go like this. They know
Yeah,
exactly. They know there's
you
no.
get
You don't
the
even need to say anything. You just and that's
thumbs up.
that's a
Yeah.
that's a wonderful thing about food, and that's why I loved it. That's why I was interested in it. When I was in the Marine Corps and cooking for everybody, it brought even people. I remember people with beef, but they would all come and eat anyway. It was like, just get over that. We'll just have a good time and eat, and that's when everyone kind of was like putting it in my ear. Hey, bro, this is a good thing. You should get into this. You're good at it. Your food's hella good. Because I care. I put in what I wanted people to get out of it. You know what I'm saying? Like I wanted
Yeah.
people. It's embarrassing if I cook and somebody eats it and they're like, I'm like, oh, hey, what's wrong with it? What's wrong with it? What do you need me to do? So it's like I
Yeah.
kind of I kind of try to make sure I think about other people when I'm cooking, because there's a lot of chefs that don't. They salt it the way they want it. And with chefs palates, I have to be careful because I can taste things like salt wise. I need salt in my food, and some person who doesn't eat salt a lot might taste my meal because I salted it the way I wanted it to. They're gonna be like, oh, this is way
It's
too
too
much
salty.
salt. So you got,
Yeah.
as a chef, you have to like kind of learn how that balance is. You got to learn how you want something that's good to you, but at the same time, you're not cooking for you. You're cooking for the customer or the consumer. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And but it's also like at the same time, you're using the cultures and the ingredients, and what you need to do. It's just like subtle differences. Like somebody might not like spice and another person might like it or love it. It's like things like that. It doesn't change the whole plate. Might change an ingredient or how much you put of an ingredient in, but it doesn't change the whole idea of that plate. And I feel like
Right.
literally that's like a perfect basis for anything, really. You know what I mean? Just take a little bit out, take the, what you don't like out of your life. Don't get rid of everything. Take little pieces that bother you or that, affect you or hurt you in any way, and just take those pieces out and supplement them with some other things that do make you happy. You know what I mean? I feel like it's like a recipe is like life. You just take in, put out, take in, and it changes as like time goes on. You have a menu. Time goes on, that menu's going to change. Those recipes are going to change, whether it's the seasons, things like that. So I think it's like food is like a perfect gateway to deal with mental health. And there's so many like different analogies you can use with food that
Yeah.
correlate with it. It's like perfect. It's fitting. So it's almost feel
Yeah.
like that's helped me a lot too. I've been watching, like, I always watch cooking stuff. I watch YouTube cookers. I watch all the like outdoor chef life and all those guys. I'm constantly like trying to learn things, and so it's like I feel like that's also helped me with my mental health because I'm distracted. You know what I mean? Like, I talked to when I was in the group with those guys, when they said they retired, like they were able to kind of not think about stuff when they were working, but when they retired, it hit them like a wall, boom, because then you're just by yourself with your thoughts. And they've been working for 30 years, not really worrying about anything, not realizing. And then all of a sudden now it's like everything's a trigger. Because what I learned in the group is your amygdala, the part of your brain that helps you react to things. When you're in the military, your training shrinks it. Basically, from all the like constantly being on alert and alert and alert and alert to the dirt, whatever, your amygdala starts to shrink, and that's the part of your brain that is like the trigger mechanism. Like, supposedly the bigger it is, the more patience you have, like in dealing with
Mm.
things that are like, they called it the monkey brain when I was in the group, and it was like basically like the smaller it is, the more like hyperactive you are, the more hyper vigilant you are. Like there's times where I'm like, I can't have people stand behind me. Like if somebody's like behind me and I don't notice and I like turn, I'm like, what the hell, So
Yeah.
it's like it's literally your brain changes. Your brain literally changes, and it's up to you to practice and practice because it's not gone. Like, even if it shrinks, you can train it back to where you can kind of work on it. You know what I mean? And it helps to be more mindful and things like that. And it helps your brain. You train your brain basically, just like you trained it to be that vigilant. You can train it to be less vigilant and try to, be more patient and things like that. And that's kind of what I've been learning and reading about in all
Mm.
these books. It's not just you in your head thinking things. It's literally like your brain physically changes. So it's like
Yeah.
it's people don't realize it. It's actually your brain changing. It's not just something that's in your head and you just think that. It's literally like your brain is different than other people's brains. And that's something I
Yeah. It
never
goes.
even thought about.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about like how things can be wired differently because there's different chemical reactions. Like the same goes with like
Oh yeah.
brain mass and everything like that, right? And
Yep.
like we were talking about earlier about like the recipes being analogous to like how you basically deal with conflict in your life or just dealing with life growing up and growing experience and all that stuff. I mean, like you can kind of like get inspiration from a recipe, kind of like you would get an inspiration from a specific like athlete or a specific like mentor or whatever, or
Yep.
even nowadays like a social influencer, or I mean social media influencer. But it's
Hmm.
important to make it your own. Like you get a recipe for somebody, make it your own. Like
Yeah.
you are allowed to make it your own. Like, and then that becomes you. Like,
Yeah,
it's
exactly. And
same.
that's what I
It's
try to do is like just do me. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, it's nice to have people follow me and all that. I'm not worried about that. I'm just trying to share my experience and say like, hey, I left where I was because I didn't feel like it was a good environment for me to be in. I took it upon myself, got my wife and me out of there, went to a new spot, took a chance. I mean, I had no idea what was going to happen. I mean, I had help with the VA and all that stuff. Obviously, I earned that, but I took a
mhm.
chance and I did what I needed to do for myself. And I feel like, hey, that's the only way you can do things for yourself is if you take chances and do something that makes you uncomfortable. And I'm learning being uncomfortable is okay. I'm learning being uncomfortable and being vulnerable at the same time. It's okay. I'm learning, like,
Mhm.
even this right now, it's hard for me to talk about this stuff at all. But like I had to tell myself, just get on here. It's a good thing. You need to talk about these things, the more people talk about them, the less uncomfortable I would feel. You know what I mean? So
Mm,
it's like the more people do this, the more other people see, and they're like, oh, you know what? It's not a bad idea. Maybe I want to kind of talk about what I got going on. And that's how we all learn. You talk about your
yeah.
experience, what you've learned from it, and you grow from it, hopefully.
Yeah, because I mean, even for me as a host, like hoping to get more, episodes like this so I can basically, because I mean, I'm talking about like we need to talk about mental health and certain things that I'm not familiar with can might sometimes make me feel uncomfortable, and I'm trying to break that, right? Because how
Oh
am I
yeah.
going to say like we need to talk about this if I'm afraid of talking about certain things, Granted, like the only rule that I have for my podcast is like, trying to keep politics aside because that kind of it goes back to what we're talking about. Like once we include politics, people go polarized on opposite sides,
Yeah.
and then we never meet in the middle, and that's where we need to be in the middle,
Yeah.
especially to be
I
able to
feel like
talk
with the
about it.
politics, they don't, it's like you're not thinking about the other side. You're just kind of, it's like if you're on one side, it's not, it's like, nah. It's like there's no common ground almost. I feel like we just need
Yep.
to have common ground. We don't need to bring any of that other stuff up. We disagree on things. That's a whole entirely different thing. The
Right.
thing that we all should agree on is that mental health is important for every single person that lives here, regardless of race, social standing, any of that stuff. It doesn't matter. You have to work too. You have to like work on yourself. You can't just assume that, like, I was like, oh, for a while I felt sorry for myself. I'm like, I'm all screwed up. Like, why did I do this? Like, I had regrets. I've had times where I've been like, why did I even join the military? You know what I mean? Like, what was I thinking? I've had moments like that, where you're in pain and you can't walk, and you see all the, like, you just feel like nobody cares, and
Mm-hmm.
it's kind of like you got to get over that. You can't sit and feel sorry for yourself your whole life, because you're never going to do anything but sit in a hole and make yourself more miserable. And the only way you're going to be happy is if you do it for yourself. Nobody
Right.
else is, even if they care, like, even if you have family that loves you, your life ain't going to fix itself, and they're not going to fix it for you. You have to do it yourself. Of course, they can help you. Everyone can help each other, but you have to take it upon yourself to do that. And I've been guilty of that. Like, even recently, I've been trying to get back into counseling, and now I'm doing all that stuff and I'm getting all that figured out. But with the fishing and all that stuff, it's helped me immensely. Being outside, like, and even with the stuff that just irks me, like, there's times where I'm like, I have to be like, you know what, this is part of the process. This tangled line that won't come undone is part of the process. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
lost $12 lure is part of the process.
Oh.
You know what I mean? That's just how you just got to say, you know what, I'm okay with being uncomfortable. I'm okay with being vulnerable. And that's what I've learned being with my wife, and reading about the mindfulness, and trying to be more mindful of other people's feelings, whether it's my family, her family, things like that. I'm trying to be more conscious about how I affect other people, instead of worrying about how everyone else affects me, or like, people don't feel sorry for me, nobody cares, I'm gonna just sit in my room and complain all day, or drink a bottle, whatever the case may be. And I think instead of doing that, you should just be like, you know what can I do? Like, that's what I've been trying to tell myself, especially lately. Like, what can I do to be better? What can I do
Mm,
to help someone else? What can I, and like, I'm guilty of like doing things and then I expect something, like, it's expectations, like, whether
yeah.
it's helping someone out, I'm like, oh, well, I helped you out. You going to be there for me? Instead of just being like, you know what? I did a deed. That's it. Like, I don't need to worry about being, repaid, or, anything like that. And I've learned that karma is crazy. Like,
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what, if you want to do that, that's on you. You're gonna reap what you sow. So I'm learning, like, I can't control what other people do. I can't control how other people think. I can't control how other people feel about me, or how they
Mm,
treat me. The only thing I can control is how I react to those things. And it's helped me a lot, especially fishing. Like, there's times where I get so mad and it just makes it worse. That's how I've learned. Like, I get frustrated. I'm like, oh, and then it just makes everything harder. And I'm like, what am I doing? So then I calm down, and then I get that knot out, or whatever, and it's like, damn, if I was just in that mode in the first place, I would have saved some heartache and had it fixed already. So it's like, I'm learning, like, I'm kind of putting myself in the situation and almost aggravating myself because I'm thinking too much, and I'm
mm.
and I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of just doing too much and thinking too many different things all at once. I'm like, so I
Me
just
too,
have
man.
to. I just with fishing, it's helped me immensely with patience and all that. I've been because before when I first started fishing, I was going in the saltwater because I was catching fish like all the time. Because it's not that it's easier, but there's more fish out there and they're more aggressive and all that stuff. And so when I go lake fishing, it's like, man, like I'm sitting out there, I'm like, I'll go out there for a few hours and not get a bite. So it's like I have to
Yeah,
understand like that's a part of the process. That's a part of being, and I'm realizing, that alone time is precious. That sitting out there and you're just chilling and just looking around. You kind of realize you're in that moment. You know what I mean? And I think that's why I was missing a lot of my life, especially when I was in the city, working and going to school full time. Like there was never moments like where I could be like, you know what, I appreciate all this stuff. You know what I mean? Now it's
I
like
definitely
I
got
look
that.
at yeah, now it's like, damn, look at what I've done. Like I live on an island, you know what I mean? Like I'm good. I'm fishing, I'm doing whatever I want to do. I could play golf, I could, do whatever, it's like I have to learn just to appreciate what's in front of me because I complain. I'm like, oh, what the heck, I
Mm.
still find myself, even though I know how much worse it can be. And that's like one of the hardest things is even when people have it good, you always find that one thing that just makes it easy to complain. Like that's what you
No,
focus on.
yeah,
Not all the good things, just like what the problem is at that moment. You know what I mean?
yeah, and because I also just started fishing, well, at least freshwater fishing about a year ago, again because of COVID. But one of the first things I learned was how to finesse fish. Throwing a weightless, T-rigged worm, and
Oh yeah.
doing that kind of whole slow and reel type of situation, and that kind of got me really patient, and because I struggled again with like being impulsive, and just doing that just helped me relax, helped me appreciate that alone time that you're talking about and everything, and that was good. And then I started going into power fishing, and it for like a
Yeah.
brief moment, maybe like a month, I back to impatient, but then I had to kind of like
Yeah.
re-educate myself or retrain my brain to kind of go back into finesse fishing. So now I'm throwing a Ned rig and I'm being slow with that, and
Oh yeah.
throwing like that for different kinds of jigs, and being slow with those. And yeah, man, I mean, there's one thing that that fishing definitely helped, besides just being in the outdoors and enjoying the fresh air, being all out in the wilderness. The one thing that I definitely like took from fishing that I'm taking for almost the rest of my life, and all other aspects of life, is the patience, being
Oh
able to
yeah.
be patient. And then also, I guess, two things. Also, like it really kind of taught me not to necessarily be focused on trying to prove something to somebody else. Like,
Yeah.
it's like I'm doing it for me. I'm not really, and I'm not even necessarily proving it to myself, to be honest. I'm just like, I just want to go out and fish, just enjoy the fresh air. If I don't
Yeah.
catch anything, oh well. If I do, yeah,
It
awesome,
makes the
thumbs
day
up.
better. Yeah.
Yeah, it always makes the day better, right? And like it's like one of those things where like the whole cliche of like a bad day of fishing beats a good day at work. So it's like, and I kind
Yeah.
of see it
Literally.
true now. Yeah.
No, literally. There's
Yeah.
no way. Nobody could argue
No,
that
and I
unless they
see that
don't
you
like
got your
fishing.
and I see that you got your fishing rods in
Oh
your
man, they're
backseat right
all
now.
yeah, they stay in here pretty much all the time unless I gotta transport hella people. But yeah, they're this is where they rent out.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
because
yeah,
usually
I
you
try
never
to go
know.
every day. Oh, I
You
know.
try to go every day.
That's oh man, the worst part. So we went to Seattle the other day. It's like, man, the whole time I was just like, man, that looks so nice. I can fish that. I can fish that. It's like the whole. That's all I think about now. It's funny because I see all the memes and everybody posting like that. When you drive by the lake and you don't got your stuff, it's like, man, it really is like, ugh. It's like,
Yeah.
man,
It's same
and
out
that's
here
the
with
cool
me
thing
too.
too.
Like,
It's like, go ahead. Sorry.
I was just gonna say it's the same thing with me. Like, now that since I started fishing, I keep a rod in my car, and then all of a sudden I'm like, okay, I have time. Let's go. Let's go to that spot. I don't see anywhere
Yeah.
you can park. All right, I'll park over here, and then just walk all the way over there. Like, yeah.
Exactly. Yep. And there's been times where I've had to walk hella far because there's like oil slick, and where I go down to fish in the marina, it's like super like a steep downhill incline or decline, and they had like an oil spill, so I had to like park way down and walk all the way down. And it's like you don't realize because you're like when you're fishing, you're like, oh yeah, this feels hella good. I'm like catching fish and not thinking nothing of it, and then it's like I look back as soon as I was done, I looked up that hill, I was like, oh. and then you just got to trek back. And it's like after that, you're like, oh, but it's like nice because especially moving to a new place, I'm not familiar with any of this area, but I like go on fish brain. Like my wife, when she goes into actually going to work, she does that every once in a while. I'll drop her off and then I just go and find new bodies of water and fish it. And I've been doing that ever since I've been here. And I feel like that's helped me a lot too, because I'm discovering new things. I'm seeing new things. I'm like, oh man, this is crazy. Because especially when you're living in Sacramento, there's this, you got Lake Top or Folsom Lake, you know what I mean? Like, and then you got the American River, which where we live, you just got a bunch of homeless people with needles everywhere. So it was like you couldn't even just go out there and enjoy yourself without worrying about somebody trying to like accost you or, be crazy. So it was like when I came here, it's like refreshing. I can go like, especially because this is a private island, you have to take a ferry to get here. And then in the marina you have to be a member to actually go into the marina. So I'll go, there's times where literally I'm by myself almost every single time. There's only a rare occasion where I go fishing and there's like somebody fishing or doing something. So it's like nice to like be able to fish and learn how to do all these things without having the pressure of everybody around you. Like I see people fishing on piers with like hundreds of people standing around them, and it's like, man, I'm out here trying to learn how to bait cast. If I was out there trying to do that, it would be so frustrating to try to like learn how to do it when you have no room. And so I'm like thinking, you know what, you got it good, Rob. You can learn how to do all your stuff. You can be patient. You can not have the pressure. You're like people are watching you or like, look at that guy,
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
I've
Cause
had to
like,
get over all that. And that's helped me. It's helped me, learning how to deal with all this stuff without having all those little extra things to like kind of tick me off or distract me for what I'm trying to learn.
yeah, no, I mean that's good to hear, honestly, because I mean we need more of that positivity. Like honestly, like I mentioned at the start of the podcast, it's not really talked about a lot. Even like when we do have success stories, they're not really talked about a whole lot. Like
Yeah.
it kind of just goes like, oh well, like for example, like with businesses, vet owned, vet operated, or what have you, right? But it
Yeah.
stops there. Like we don't see the struggle that they may have had to get to that place. So it's really
Exactly.
good that
Yeah.
and it's really good that you kind of share this story because I mean, again, we need more stories like this, and we're about like 3 minutes before our hour, but I couldn't have asked for a better ending, honestly. But really quick before we hop off, go ahead and like any final thoughts like that you want to talk about, or any last thoughts that you want to throw out before we hop off.
Oh yeah, definitely. All right. So if I'm gonna say anything, if you feel like you have anything in your life that you want to get off your chest or you want to talk to somebody about and you feel uncomfortable talking to anyone about it, get help. Please get help. Do not wait. Don't wait till your whole life passes you by, because you will live in regret forever. Not based on my experience, but from what I've learned from other vets is that it is better to work on yourself now, because you will be better off in the long run than you will if you wait and procrastinate. And it'll
Mm,
help you, it'll help your family, it'll help your loved ones, it'll help your friends, it'll help everybody, kind of help you understand yourself and them understand what you're going through. It's all about communication. Communicate with your loved ones. Tell them, if you're having a bad day, express that to them. Don't be afraid to talk about how you feel, because they're gonna know. Like when you are around your family, they're gonna know when there's something wrong with you. When they love you, they can feel it. It's like they have that intuition. So whether you think that you're hiding it from them and you're protecting them, you're not. You're hurting yourself and you're hurting them. So all I ask is anybody out there, whether they're veterans or anybody that's been through traumatic experiences, if you guys need help, please do everyone a favor, including yourself. Most importantly, yourself. Go get help, because it's important, and it will just, it's helped me immensely. I still have a lot of work to do. And that's another thing. Make sure you always understand that you never will be able to stop working. You will have to work always to help yourself. You will always have to think about things. You will always have to be mindful. That moment, like how you said with the fishing, that moment you started doing the, quick fishing, when you went back, it was like you had to retrain yourself. You constantly have to retrain yourself and learn. And And that's like the thing. I started getting better, then I started going back, and then I got better. And it's like you're constantly yo-yoing. Just know that when you're going down, you will come back up. You just have to work for that. And that's
Yeah.
my biggest thing. And just work hard, be appreciative of what you have, understand what you have, and love what you have. And then take all the
Mhm.
bad things out of your life that you don't need in there, negative people, even the environment you live in, any of that stuff. Just take it upon yourself, take the chance, do what you got to do for you.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And I'll leave off with my thoughts in saying the same thing. And also, like we talked about earlier, like let's try to be a little bit more empathetic with each other, and build that social interaction.
Definitely.
Just I mean, when people come across a vet, don't automatically assume something just because you've seen a vet prior or seen on TV. I
Hmm.
mean, the most important thing is we kind of just start trying to get to know each other if we do want to interact with somebody. And if we don't, just respectfully, just kind of just respect them for what they are, just another human being that's just
Yep.
living through the world. You never know what kind of demons they're battling or who they're trying to help. You never know. So let's
Exactly.
just be a little bit more empathetic and just kind of really interact if we have to. Like at least saying hi, goodbye, or hey, how was your day? That's it. At the very least, we don't necessarily all have
That's
to be holding hands and singing kumbaya, but
it's
empathy.
funny you say that because on this island they have this thing. It's called We Wave. So everybody, when you're driving by, they wave at you. It's like this thing. And like when we first got here, it was awkward because in California, you don't. There's nothing like that. Everyone's all
Yeah.
like, So it was like it was a joke, but you know what? It made me feel good to know that people were like just saying hi. As you drive by. It's like
Mhm.
even little things like that. You don't realize how much it can influence a person's day. You know what I mean? Just like there's times where I've heard about people who wanted to commit suicide and they just said, if that one person, would have just said something to me or, things like that, that changes you. You just gotta try not to worry about what you have going on when you talk to somebody. You know what I mean? Just say, hey, I hope you're having a good day. Don't be selfish,
Mhm.
you know what I mean? And then I think that would help a lot too. And that's the whole, saying hi and all that. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, that was an awesome discussion, and thanks again, Rob, for coming on and sharing your experience and your insight.
Yep.
Really
Thank
quick
you.
before we hop off, tell everybody where they can find you. I know we have people listening on Spotify, Apple, Anchor, but then we also have the YouTube video that will be released. But go ahead and let people know.
You could check me out on my Instagram page. That's all I got. I don't got a Twitter or any of that stuff. It's the Marina Marine, at the Marina Marine. Check me out if you want to.
Mhm.
I appreciate y'all for joining us and checking us out and seeing what's going on. I appreciate you guys listening to my story, and I appreciate y'all. Thank you.
Yep. All right. So, well, really quick before as we end the podcast, stay on the call or on the conference, and just so we can recap. But all right, well, that's it for today, and thank you all for listening and watching, and see you for the next episode.